I was a kid. The first time I saw Clint, he was the cowboy. You know, the tall, laconic, kind of tough cowboy, an admirable, heroic figure.
A guy with a gun and a mission. You know, this is something that he owns so majestically.
Clint Eastwood is the abstracted essence of the American hero, the personification of the great Western, of the American, all the things we think we all are and would like to be.
There's very few people that you can put in boots and a hat that the audience buys as a cowboy character.
Clint Eastwood embodies the West, a man of few words, stoic, very tough. He just seemed to have, you know, the 1,000-yard stare of a guy who shot too many guys. It was great to sit in the theater and eat your popcorn and watch him just selflessly shoot all these bad guys and keep our streets safe.
Clint was a student of John Ford and John Wayne. He took the best of each of those two, and he took that to the next level.
As a child of the West, California born and bred, Clint Eastwood's love for Westerns started early.
When I was a kid, I liked Westerns a lot. I grew up watching Gary Cooper and Joel McCrea and Randolph Scott.
Eastwood's first big break was playing Rowdy Yates on the television series Rawhide. The part fit him like a well-worn pair of boots.
When we did Rawhide, which was the first steady job I ever had as an actor, it seemed like everybody thought I was the natural to be in it for some reason. I guess because I was a, you know, sort of a rangy kid hanging around the back lot at Universal. And the secretaries around the lot used to call me Coop, you know, as a nickname. So I guess they thought I had that Gary Cooper corrective shoes on or something like that. And I was looking rather awkward.
But the era of Gary Cooper was over. After decades of reliable success, Hollywood Westerns were now dead at the box office. It took a maverick Italian filmmaker named Sergio Leone to rejuvenate the genre. Having already been turned down by Henry Fonda, James Coburn, and Charles Bronson, Leone offered the lead role in his new Western to the rangy kid from Rawhide.
They sent the script to my agent and said, would Clint want to do an Italian, Spanish, German co-production of a Japanese samurai story into a Western? And I said, not particularly.
So he reads this thing. It's very wordy, it explains everything, and it has lots of problems with it, but there's something there. It's basically a transposition of Kurosawa's movie Yojimbo, the samurai film, into a Western setting, and that's unusual.
I was a huge fan of Yojimbo, and so when I started reading the script and realized it was Yojimbo, I said, yeah, I'll do it, even though it was a very small production. I didn't know Leone. He wasn't very well known. He'd only made one picture.
Sergio Leone's films were a new kind of Western, and they inspired Eastwood to break some new ground of his own.
I had always wanted to be a film director. When I went to Italy, I kind of got reinstilled a little bit because Leone was very free. And I thought, yeah, I'd like to do this someday.
Eastwood's first Western as a director paid homage to the genre's past and to his mentor. The film was High Plains Drifter.
I've always seen High Plains Drifter as kind of his investing and living in the Italian form and taking the reins from those he had been learning from and whose films he had been in and making, honestly, an Italian Western.
And there's a very interesting press still for High Plains Drifter, which has Clint Eastwood, and he's standing there in his frock coat, and he's leaning on a gravestone, and on the gravestone it says Donald Siegel, and the gravestone next to it says Leone. He's saying, those are my two mentors, and I'm saying goodbye to them. I'm now on my own.
Having established himself as a Western director in his own right, Eastwood's next film cemented a reputation that would only grow in the years to come.
Josey Wales.
The moment for me when Eastwood pops into kind of his own brand and his own complete idea of what a Western could be is Outlaw Josey Wales.
I kind of think with Josie Wales that Clint had escaped the shadow of Leone in some ways. I don't know, it just feels like a Clint movie to me. It feels like Clint's Western.
Well, you're gonna pull those pistols and whistle Dixie.
The Outlaw Josey Wales begins as if it's going to be a traditional revenge Western. His wife and son are massacred by the Redlegs.
I don't think I'll ever forget that opening. It's so economical and fast and brutal. The man's family getting completely wiped out, murdered, burned alive. You can't imagine any man recovering from that loss. And I think the question he poses at the front of that picture is, can a man survive that loss? And what do you become?
It may seem like a cliche to start a movie with a guy loses everything he has, his family, and then for the rest of the life he's gonna make up for it. Bad movies do that badly, and good movies can take that theme and try to find the humanity in it, the level of understanding that goes with that kind of loss.
Rain's giving us the it.
In Eastwood's hands, this well-worn Western theme became a deceptively complex tale of redemption and reconciliation.
Instead of it being a bloodthirsty revenge Western, it's about someone who says, I don't want nobody depending on me.
She's not going to Mexico with us.
With us? Now, wait a minute. I got you a horse. You're on your own now.
Here's where it completely subverts Western conventional storytelling. Most Westerns, if you break them down, if you analyze them, are about a character or a group of characters who have death nipping at their heels.
I hope you die.
That'll be the day. And they'll either embrace death at the end or by some clever means avoid death. Josey Wales turns that paradigm on its ear. It reverses it. Here's a guy who goes out to seek death, and life won't leave him alone. Life keeps nipping at his heel.
You're all alone now, Wales.
Not quite alone.
He's trying to be alone and wants to be left alone. But the more he travels, the more people gather around him.
Even a dog he picks up at one point, and the dog keeps following him, and he spits this wad of tobacco, hits the dog between the eyes, and the dog comes back wagging its tail. He can't even get rid of the dog.
Well, you might as well ride along with us. Hell, everybody else is.
At the end, he has kind of a whole family that is built around him, and he's stuck with it.
And slowly, as he goes on his odyssey, he understands what responsibility is. So by the end, he's become the father of this extended family.
It's like Frank Capra made a Western, to me. You know, filtered through Clint Eastwood's gritty sensibilities, but it's almost like a Frank Capra Western.
Having been raised on the films of John Ford and Howard Hawks, and inspired by the boldness of Sergio Leone, Eastwood had begun to reinvent the Western in his own image.
I think of Clint Eastwood as kind of the uniting force that kind of emerges from the spaghetti Western, comes back to this country, takes up the lines that were coming from Alan Ladd and John Wayne and connects them to the kind of urgency of the films coming out of Europe. And the way he guided the rest of us in what a Western could be was in being proud of both sides.
Eastwood also brought to the screen a new kind of Western hero, a complex character with more ambiguity than most of the men portrayed by James Stewart or John Wayne.
I know Don Siegel, when he did The Shootist, he told John Wayne, he was asking him, he says, you come in and you see the guy in the mirror, and then you shoot him, and you come around and you crawl down the bar, and then you come up, and the other guy is there, and he says, and you shoot him right in the back. And he said there was a long pause. This is Don Siegel telling me this story. And he said, a long pause, and he said, John Wayne turned to him and said, he says, I don't shoot anyone in the back. You know, and he goes, Oh, and Don made the biggest error he could have ever made. After that, he said, well, Clint would shoot him right in the back. And he said, John Wayne got as red as a beet. He was ready to kill him at that particular point. He says, I don't give a goddamn what that kid's doing. He just does it, you know, and it went off. And he had a good laugh telling the story for years after that.
Eastwood's willingness to play characters of questionable virtue was on full display in his next Western, Pale Rider.
Pale Rider was a movie we did in 1984. It was a movie that had some of the elements of the Sergio Leone movies where Clint played sort of this preacher with no name.
Well, in Pale Rider, the character is another ambiguous character coming down out of the mountains, much like the High Plains Drifter.
One of the things that struck me about Pale Rider was the confidence that Eastwood keeps developing in his style of filmmaking. And I think that there's a kind of greater and greater economy, less of an effort to wow with a shot. Pale Rider signals for me, and it's kind of almost preparatory work for Unforgiven, in which it's the refining of this style, which I think he will then kind of hit completely out of the park.
I'm heading up north in through Nebraska to Wyoming. Gonna kill a couple of no-good cowboys.
For what?
For cutting up a lady.
Unforgiven was one of the real great surprises when I read that as a script. It was extremely well written, and it was very different. But at the time, I thought this would be a great script for me to do when I'm just a little bit older. And finally, at the end of the 80s, I thought, I think I'd better revisit that. So I pulled it out and reread it, and it was still as good as ever.
Ned, you remember that drover I shot through the mouth and his teeth came out the back of his head? I think about him now and again. He didn't do anything to deserve to get shot.
If you see the arc of American movie westerns, good guys are white hats, bad guys and the black hats. That whole thing has gone all the way up to Unforgiven, where characters are not quite so cut and dried in terms of good and bad.
Everybody had a purpose and everybody had an interest in something else. And so nobody was a villain outright. They were just villains because of circumstances. The Gene Hackman character was written so well. I mean, he was a violent guy.
I guess you think I'm kicking you, Bob.
But he was a guy who just wanted comfort. He just wanted to have a nice retirement.
The Gene Hackman character wasn't a buffoon. He was a very tough guy right to the end. And Westerns and the heroics that go with them never suffer when the bad guy is strong.
Well, I ain't gonna hurt no woman. I'm gonna hurt you. Not gentle like before, but bad.
I swore I would never be involved in a picture with this much violence in it. But the more I read it, and the more I came to understand the purpose of the film, the more fascinated I became with this idea.
More than perhaps any Western before it.
No.
Unforgiven presents an unflinching look at the cost of violence on those who perpetrate it.
It's a hell of a thing, killing a man. You take away all he's got and all he's ever gonna have.
We don't often want to deal with those themes. You know, too often the bad Westerns, people just, they move on and everything's happy, and it's not. You're marked with the killing of another human being. It marks you forever.
Coming out of the tradition of the American Western, which reflected America in the first half of the century, he seems to be tackling what is ultimately the truth about it in Unforgiven.
The marvelous thing about the picture was that he's actually looking back at his own past and John Wayne's past and the other Western pasts and blowing it asunder and saying, you know, the West was never really like that. This picture, in a strange way, debunks it all.
There's something about kind of the nihilistic aspect of it that was like, I mean, he's telling everybody he's gonna, like, you know, come back and murder their whole family. You know, I mean, it's like, and this is the hero of the piece.
You better not cut up to otherwise harm no whores, or I'll come back and kill every one of you sons of bitches.
So it's not your classic Shane rides off into the sunset kind of thing. He rides off, yeah, but you know that if they mess around, he's coming back and he's gonna burn down the whole town, you know, which is kind of cool.
If I were proposing that Eastwood emerge from spaghetti westerns and all this kind of chaos of style, and then on the other side came and was raised clearly on the kind of the American Western, it is the movie in which it all comes together. The darkness, the revenge, the level of dynamism that the early Westerns, American Westerns, never really approached. And then at the same time, this kind of panache.
In his reinvention of the Western, Clint Eastwood never forgot the rich traditions of the giants who came before him.
I have always been so impressed with Eastwood because he has always been so deeply respectful to those filmmakers that he learned from. In fact, wasn't Unforgiven dedicated to Sergio and Don? Filmmakers subsequent to him have studied him. I, for example, have studied what Eastwood has done as a director and have been inspired by it.
When you look at the pantheon of American filmmakers, Clint is right there. I don't know how anybody can be a movie star for 40 years, performing at a very high level as both an actor and a director.
He's had a journey, and whatever his offering is, you know, as an artist, because I think that that's how he's approached his career, we honor what he's trying to make and go watch it.
He's a natural filmmaker. Just has such clarity and purpose. When you work with him, you feel that.
You know there ain't no forgetting.